Are you looking for an optimal DFS lineup on DraftKings for Week 10 in the NFL? I'm Professor MJ, a university statistics professor, and I wrote a program in R, which is a statistical software, that finds the optimal lineup, maximizing projected points by meeting the $50,000 salary cap, of course. Now, where do my player projections come from? They are a mix of my own predictions as well as projected points provided by some reliable websites. Before I suggest a few specific lineups for this weekend, let me start off by presenting the top 5 players at each position, as determined by expected points per $1,000 salary. In other words, I'm presenting you the best bargains at each position. Let's get rolling. Alright, so let's get started with the 5 best bargains at the quarterback position. The top one is Kyler Murray facing the Buffalo Bills this weekend. He has an expected points per $1,000 salary of 3.38. which was obtained by taking the expected points for Murray, which were established at 27.0, divided by his salary on DraftKings, which is $8,000, and then multiplied by 1,000. That's how you obtain 3.38 EPPT. The second best bargain is pretty close, Derek Carr against a depleted Denver squad, with an expected points per $1,000 salary of 3.33. The third best pick is Daniel Jones facing the Eagles with an EPPT of 3.29, and in fourth place, tied with Daniel Jones, is Carson Wentz, who is facing Jones this weekend. And in fifth place, you've got Tua facing the Chargers. Let's move on to the top 5 running backs, where we have a huge bargain. You really cannot omit this player from your optimal lineups. Mike Davis facing a tough Bucs defense, but he has a low salary because it was expected that Christian McCaffrey would play this weekend, but he has been ruled out, which makes Mike Davis a big bargain, with 5.05 expected points per $1,000 salary. Compare that to the guy who's number 2, DeAndre Swift facing Washington, whose EPPT is significantly lower at 2.76. In third place, you've got Aaron Jones against the Jaguars, who's very close to Swift with 2.75. In fourth place, still very close to the others, Josh Jacobs against Denver. And finally, we've got Leonard Fournette facing the Carolina Panthers with an EPPT of 2.73. So it's really extremely tight between second and fifth place. Let's move on to the wide receivers. The top bargain this week is Jakeem Grant of the Miami Dolphins facing the LA Chargers. He's a bargain probably because people thought that Preston Williams might play this weekend, but he is out. So Grant should get many targets and he has a pretty low salary. So his expected projected points per $1,000 is 3.30, which is significantly higher than the guy in second place, Robbie Anderson against the Bucs. In third place, we have a reliable guy, Keenan Allen, playing in Miami. In fourth, we have Tyler Lockett of the Seahawks facing the Rams in what might be a shootout. And finally, in fifth place, Emmanuel Sanders against San Francisco. What about the tight ends? The best deal can be obtained via Austin Hooper against Houston, who have a pretty bad secondary. The second best choice is a guy I believe is underrated in the NFL, Logan Thomas, facing Detroit. In third place, Hunter Henry against Miami. Fourth, we have Darren Waller, who is more expensive, but he has a fairly high projected points against Denver. And in fifth place, we've got Evan Ingram against the Eagles. Alright, let's round up with the DST, which means defense and special teams. And as you're about to find out, the top four there's a pretty big gap between the top four and the others. In first place, the best bargain is the Detroit Lions against Washington with an EPPT of 3.62. In second place, we've got the Rams against the Seahawks. Oh, that's a pretty scary proposition with the Seahawks having such a great offense, but the Rams have a low salary. That's why they're second, but I'm not super thrilled about taking the Rams. In third place, the Raiders against Denver, who are likely to turn the ball over a few times. In fourth place, the Saints against San Francisco and Nick Mullins at QB. And then in fifth place, you'll notice that the EPPT is significantly lower for the Giants facing the Eagles. Alright, let me now present specific optimal lineups to you. Building a good lineup for GPP versus cash games is completely different. For those of you who are not familiar with the terms, GPP means Guaranteed Prize Pool. GPPs are tournaments with a large number of contestants fighting for big prizes, where only a small fraction of people end up making money, between 10 and 20%. On the other hand, cash games are 50-50 endeavors with smaller payouts. For example, you may have 10 persons competing against each other. The bottom 5 loses its buy-in, while the top 5 doubles up, minus a commission taken out by DraftKings. A good lineup for GPPs may be a bad one in cash formats. In summary, GPP lineups must ideally have the following two characteristics. You want at the very least one player in your lineup whose scoring is positively correlated with another. The best example is a QB wide receiver duo. If the wide receiver catches 3 TD passes, chances are your QB will have a good day too. Characteristic number 2, you want to own 1 or 2 players that will make you stand out from the crowd. You want them to be owned by a small fraction of participants on DraftKings. For these reasons, this section on optimal lineups will be split into 2 separate cases. Alright, so according to my R program, here is the lineup that maximizes the expected projected points. Actually, the expected projected points for this specific lineup is 152.6 fantasy points. The QB is Kyler Murray. At running back, you want to take Aaron Jones and Alvin Kamara, which is a very solid duo. At wide receiver, we're going to be a bit weaker. We're going to take the number 1 bargain at the position that we saw earlier, Jakeem Grant from the Dolphins. We're going to pick Robbie Anderson of the Panthers. And finally, Keenan Allen of the Chargers. Now at the tight end position, we're going to pick up Austin Hooper, which was our number 1 bargain at the position. And the flex will be Mike Davis, who, as we saw earlier, is the biggest bargain of the week by far. And finally, on defense, we're taking the Detroit Lions facing the Washington football team. Now, I strongly believe this is a very solid cash game lineup. Let's now present 3 good lineups for GPPs. Here's how I suggest proceeding when setting up your GPP lineups. Number 1, find a good QB wide receiver tandem from the same team by looking at the best bargains at these two positions. Step number 2, pick players at other positions which bring a good bang for your buck. And step number 3, avoid including players that bring negative correlation in your lineup. For example, you do not want a running back from the same team as your QB wide receiver duo. Nor do you want your defense to be facing one of your offensive players. This week, here are some good QB wide receiver combos that can form the basis of your GPP lineups. Tua Tagovailoa and Jakeem Grant or Devontae Parker. Also, Daniel Jones and Sterling Shepard. And finally, Kyler Murray and Larry Fitzgerald. Starting from those duos, I can recommend a few GPP lineups. You can use any of them, or you can change a few players based on your personal preferences, because you may disagree with me on some players, and that's fine. Here is the first optimal lineup for the big tournaments on DraftKings. So first, we're making use of the Tua and Jakeem Grant duo. And in red on your screen are the players that differ from the optimal lineup for cash games. Remember, this was our optimal lineup previously for cash games. Basically, we're only replacing 3 players. Instead of QB Kyler Murray, we now have Tua. At tight end, instead of Austin Hooper, we have upgraded with Darren Waller. And finally, on defense, instead of taking the Lions, we are upgrading with the New Orleans Saints. Optimal lineup number 2 for GPP games. This time we're making use of the Daniel Jones and Sterling Shepard duo. And the only 3 players that are identical to our optimal lineup for cash games are the 3 running backs, Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, and Mike Davis, which are shown in blue here. So at QB, without any surprise, we have Daniel Jones. At wide receiver, we have 3 new guys, Devontae Parker, Tyler Lockett, and Sterling Shepard. Remember that Lockett was indeed part of our top 5 bargains at wide receiver. At tight end, we're taking Waller, and on defense, the New Orleans Saints. The third and final optimal lineup that I can propose to you for GPP games uses Kyler Murray and Larry Fitzgerald from the cards. Again, the other wide receivers will be Devontae Parker and Tyler Lockett. Now we have a new guy at tight end, Hunter Henry. I could not pick Waller again because otherwise we were exceeding the salary cap. And on defense, we're taking the New Orleans Saints. I hope you found this video insightful. My goal is to help you crush your opponents and rack up some winnings through the use of my projected points and my program that finds the best lineups. Come back next week for more DFS advice. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you don't miss out on my optimal DFS lineups in the NFL. This is Professor MJ saying so long.